Hi, everybody. Welcome. All right. So today we're talking about vocal agility and sort of in a slightly more broad focus compared to thinking about specifically like riffs and runs, which are generally like an agility act. But how do we prepare for agility in general? What does it mean to have vocal agility? And what are some different strategies? Um, so in general, the voice is a little sluggish, and it's mainly because we have to do this specific muscle isolation. Oh, hi, welcome. I haven't seen you in a little bit. Um, so yeah, we have to do all the specific muscle isolation, and it's just hard to coordinate things appropriately to get the right pressure for the right pitch at just a very, very quick moment. And so in general, it just takes some time for the body to coordinate, and we want to have a routine to practice. Good, good. I'm really glad. A lot of this is like a cumulative effect, right? Like if you're watching these videos and you're doing the ones that that particularly help you the most, they'll help you get the next one down, and et cetera, et cetera. I try to build off of the practice like this. So, um, this is, with everything, we're working on our ability to get the right kind of coordination and agility in a lot of ways is just how quickly can we coordinate our voice? Can we jump through registers? Can we group notes together? And like the last time I did an agility practice, we'll mention some key components that help us with agility in general. And those are lightness. So in general, if we tend to over engage, we slow down our voice. We get a little sluggish or heavy. Accuracy, it doesn't matter if we're whipping around, if we aren't quite clear with our pitches, it doesn't really register as much agility. It feels kind of more sloppy, right? And so sometimes when we move fast, it's really hard to stay accurate. And that's something that you're going to have to go back and listen and refine and figure out subtle adjustments of pressure and space to get just the right kind of accuracy on something that's particularly fast and difficult. Um, and the other thing is a weird one, separateness. And the reason I talk about this is similar to with being too heavy and not having accuracy. We can sometimes smooth together our notes too much, and it makes it feel like we're going through less, right? So if we can get really specific and find sort of a little bit of a separateness between each pitch as we're doing them, it creates this effect of sort of like knocking at targets like one after the next, like boom, 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 boom. And that takes a little bit of um, tension. In some ways, we actually create like a little bit of resistance with our throat, a little bit of pulsing with our support, and that helps us get a little bit of that separateness. We'll talk about doing some strategies like using staccato exercises to feel that out. In general, you can always go through these exercises with some staccato first because it really forces you to be exact with your support and the shape and precision of every vowel, syllable, and note that you're singing. Because if you don't quite hit it, it'll become immediately apparent. You don't have a lot of time to scoop yourself back up to the right pitch, right? So we want to be really sure of where we're going, dial it into our muscle memory, and this takes some practice in general. So we're going to go over general agility exercises that just speed up the voice, and they can sort of be applied to all genres. That's why I sort of called it this one. Yes, once we start going through like the pentatonic scale and particular riff patterns, it starts to sound more like a specific genre. So I'm going to do some that are going to maybe seem a little more classical and can definitely be applied to more of a contemporary thing, and vice versa. So, um, it's not quite that. Yes, when we're singing in general, we want to have an evenness in our phrases and tone, but we like to give that maybe a little more of a separation. Agility. Is more particularly about how quickly can we get from one note to the next, right? So if you're thinking of rhythm, if we can get things in time to a faster and faster tempo, like in classical music, you'll have moments where you have these big runs and vocalises, and you have to keep them locked in with the piano, and it just takes some time to get them up to speed. And yes, so all of this about is all about how we sing, and we definitely our throat is involved when we sing, but we actually want to use more of these other systems, right, with our lower belly and our back. So follow up on some of those videos on breath control and support, and you'll see what I mean. Like the main power center is actually with our lower abdominal muscles, and that helps us relax this area. When this area gets too tight, Generally, if we feel like we're singing from our throat, remember, like one of the concepts is we can't really consciously feel or control the muscles in our larynx directly. So if we feel like we're using our throat, it's usually the muscles around the larynx that are holding it. And anytime we make something too rigid, it's not going to be able to respond fast enough. So that's part of this. Having proper support and proper release in our neck is actually going to help us get agility. This leads us to this next concept, which is one that I didn't talk about in my other riffs and runs, but also is really helpful with agility, which is thinking about flexibility. So if I'm working on agility, one of the first things that I might do is actually work on some sirens and finding a gentle mix so that I'm not getting too heavy or straining. So I'm going to be watching my head and my neck and actually making sure that this area stays pretty loose. Um, the most simple one to start with is just going from an ah to an e vowel and working through your registers. Now keep the volume low, keep it gentle. That doesn't mean that we don't engage with our body or put energy into our support though. So loud and soft doesn't directly correlate with support and adding pressure. In fact, adding pressure can help us sing softer and lighter. So this is the concept where I was going through like an ah to an e like this. So going yeah. We want a very light, kind of gentle mix. You can think a little breathy, like yeah. And we want that coordination really nice and isolated so that we're not engaging any of these muscles. That's going to slow us down ultimately. And the way that I'm going up and down, right, just to really bring this home is actually by pushing down and out with my lower abdominal muscles, sinking into my breath. That helps the pitch rise, and then I relax as it falls back down. So it's like this if I were showing with my hands. So one thing you can do once you've got that kind of down is start working with specific vowels. So I might start with an E and go like E. Just getting flexible, getting ready for doing some agility exercises. Then I'd go through an A and I'd go like hey. Think of this as stretching these muscles, getting everything nice and loose. And then I might do an ah. Ah. An O. Oh, and then lastly an ooh. So I'm just covering some of our basic, I call them cardinal vowels, sort of a joke, but it's our main vowels that we sing with. So the last one is ooh, going like ooh. I'm just trying to get that nice sort of smooth slip and slide like feeling. Um, so getting flexibility is going to help you sing with a lighter tone, which is going to help you with your agility in general. So start with that. The next thing is what I mentioned, using staccato exercises. This helps to warm up our lower abdominal muscles and also just helps us work with separateness and accuracy. So staccatos in general are going to be really great when you're practicing agility. And you can always go through any of these harder exercises that we'll go over later. It's like, oh my gosh, those are they're going to be a little intense as we go through a bigger sweeping pattern, try to knock out a lot of targets. You can always go through with staccato. You can always slow it down and then also break things up into smaller groups. So a lot of this is cumulative. I work with small patterns and then start sticking them together, and that helps to train my coordination to get really accurate. Um, yeah. So let's talk about staccato. So staccato means short and detached as opposed to smoothing everything together like legato, right? Legato means linked together. And so that's going to be more of that evenness of phrases and tone. And you can sing with agility and legato. We just want to be careful. Sometimes things can run together too much and we lose that definition. So it doesn't feel like we're moving through as many targets. So some of this is like most singing things is like a little more of an illusion in some ways. But ultimately, as we do these exercises, you'll speed up the actual physical mechanism and your coordination as well. So staccato, right, is going like ha 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 ha, and I'm just pulsing the note. Now, when I move through different notes, this is going to get harder. So I might just do like a simple five note pattern first and go like ha 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 ha. I'm trying to get those really accurate. And again, light, right? I'm not ha 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 ha. That's actually going to slow me down, right? So it's ha 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 ha. And you have to find this balance, right? If you don't quite engage enough, you don't hit the pitch, right? You might be like ha 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 ha. It's a little under, right? Versus ha 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 ha. So sometimes I'll add to this and I'll do also a little fifth jump. So we're going to talk a lot about jumping compared to stepwise motion as well, because they're different forms of agility. So I might go like ha 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 ha. And that last ha ha ha, when you jump to it, right, you have to be really careful and make sure you save the feeling of what that note was like when you were doing it stepwise, right? So ha 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 ha. You might feel that out and then be like ha 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 ha, and really just try to get that locked in, and then put it back together and be like ha 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 ha. And then you can start to kind of test yourself. I'm not going to do this right now, but you can pull up a metronome on Google really easily. Just look up metronome, and it'll give you a little sliding bar. I talked about this with my rhythm stuff. Hi, welcome. Um, I talked about this with my rhythm stuff a few lessons back, and you can actually put yourself up faster and faster with that click, just so you have something to follow. Sometimes when we're pushing our tempo, we get stuck in our own sort of comfortable muscle memory, and it takes a little bit of like a carrot in front of you, so to speak, right, to get you to race a little faster. So start slow, right? Work with the coordination first, but ha 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 and then I might try to incrementally go faster and faster. Ha 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 ha. Yeah. Yeah, and just gonna respond to some of these questions here. Just like what so yes, it is difficult to engage those lower muscles. Um, and so this is kind of part of this game right here, is to try and stimulate those muscles. So you also can do this with breath, right? We've sort of rewinding a second. You can first go right, like a hissing sound exercise. And you can, even though I'm not showing you, you can see, right, my belly is pushing out and kind of bouncing like this. It feels almost like a little belly laugh or a giggle, or like ha 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 ha. It's slightly maniacal sounding when you're thinking about it, with a nice open resonance, which is kind of funny. But again, this is just to get that feeling. And then doing these staccato exercises is really going to wake that up. Another answer is doing some sirens or slides that use SOVTs, right? Like a Z sound going like zzz, or a lip trill. And that helps you cover a lot of territory rather quickly, and feel that connection to your belly. So when we're doing accuracy, what's hard is we have to give just the right push at just the right time so that we can kind of jump or bounce around. Like in some of my other videos about agility, talk about the rebound effect, where you build up some pressure and then you kind of like a rubber band sling right back and ride those notes, and that's how you can get a lot of speed. Um, that's great. I'm so glad, and just, what I would mention is be patient with this stuff. It takes some time to get the coordination, and then progress isn't as linear as people would like. Sometimes you'll make these big epiphanies once you get the right muscle memory. So that's why a lot of this is about just finding tricks and tools and giving people different things to try until you find something that locks in. So that's doing some staccato stuff. We're gonna come back to that as well a little later. Um, I mentioned this concept of a rebound effect. So this idea of using turnarounds. So one of the hard things with our voice is actually to change direction. So think about like a shuttle run, like one of those uh, physical education things, right? Where you run and you grab something and then you change directions, you go back and then you run back and forth. And if you're just going full force ahead, you can't turn around. So staying light on your feet is this extended metaphor. Working on turnarounds really helps with your agility because it keeps your support really dynamic, so that you're not just bulldozing through things, but ready to stop and pivot. So some of these are going to be repetition from these other lessons, but I'm going to add to them. So one of them is this one that I've done where I go na, ne, ni, no, nu. This is sort of like crisscrossing, right? I'm na, ne, ni, no, nu, and getting that sort of slingshot effect. The first note, na, I'm pressing out with my support. And then the second note is sort of grouped with that. It's this feeling of releasing the support. So it's like, na, na. If you're following that and going, na, you're going to get a little heavy. So you can actually do this by releasing the pressure and sort of riding the wave, so to speak. So again, I'm going, na, ne, ni, no, nu, and then you start to string these together. So I did them in little groups, right? And then na, ne, ni, no, nu. I might jump around with this. Na, ne, ni, no, nu. There's all sorts of little things you can do with our technique that will continue to improve your efficiency. For example, the N, if you're going na, ne, ni, that's slowing you down too, right? Because it's extraneous coordination. So think na, ne, ni, no, nu. I'm just using a tongue going right to the hard palate and staying very, very light. Again, I might start bumping it up on the metronome and start going na, ne, ni, no, nu. Na, ne, ni, no, nu. And I can start to test myself, right? Na, ne, ni, no, nu. You might be feeling, that's not so bad. Add another note to it, right? So we can do 3 notes at a time and go na, ne, ni, no, nu. This starts to sound a little bit like a riff, right? Na, ne, ni, no, nu. Um, this is part of this game. I'm just responding to some comments here. Singing is a very vulnerable and sometimes feels very terrifying experience, but ultimately, it's the process of exploring and feeling out what your voice is like. And I think that's where the beauty comes is from this process and the practice. So think less about the end result and think more about the process and enjoy the playfulness. Like, so this kind of practice for me is very playful, right? We're just sometimes we're gonna mess up. We're gonna hit weird targets. We're gonna smooth things together and be like, blah, blah. But if you're more comfortable with making mistakes like that and don't think of it as like sort of that limited mindset where it's like everything that you do wrong is a testament to how bad your voice is, instead of thinking of it more like a growth mindset, right? Which is every time something doesn't quite work out, it's a chance to learn something from it. And repetition and playfulness, these things are really, really powerful allies as you work on your voice. Because, yes, you know, get up and sing in front of people sometimes and do solos and some of these gigs that I have. And every once in a while, the thought runs through your head, this is a little silly and ridiculous. Like, what am I doing up here? Everybody's watching me sing some songs. But then I would tell you, and then I'll get right back to the lesson. I'll tell you that, like, you think that and you go through these mental gymnastics, and then you realize every once in a while that through this process that someone is really profoundly moved or excited or inspired by what you're doing, and it makes it all worthwhile. So think of it as this process, right? um, it's a process of beautification, right? Like, by finding freedom in your voice, I think you find beauty, and that's sort of the cool thing about this practice. So again, back to where we were, we're going in 3 note bursts, right? You can separate them and be like na, and do it just like that. Ne, ni, no, nu. Do you notice I'm starting to do that little pulsing thing a little bit? I'm going like na, ne, ni, no, nu. It's the tiniest little bit of tension. I think of it like putting your fingers on the tines of a comb, creating a little resistance and slipping to the next note. It's sort of a contemporary thing in some ways, but this is the exercise, is going na, ne, ni, no, nu. Playing around with it. Na, ne, ni, no, nu. Na, ne, ni, no, nu. So that's that sort of game. It sounds a little weird when you isolate it out, but each one of these pieces is teaching you how to do that little 3 note riff at different spots in the scale, which all feel a little different and actually require going over to get the right sensation. Someone mentioned last time, Are all riffs just going straight down? No, but that tends to be a very popular way that people riff because of, I think, the sensation of that rebound thing. But we could take these exercises and flip them around, right? I could go na ne ni no nu na ne ni no nu. It feels a little different. You kind of have to go against gravity, and the tendency might be to lift or add too much weight and be like na ne ni. Think of it as na ne ni no nu. We have to still kind of pulse that main note and try to make the top notes a little lighter. This is why I was working on that flexibility thing, right? So if we're na na ne ni no nu, I know that I can get from that note from the root to the fifth really quickly just by sliding. No, it's just sometimes in that pursuit we start to get rigid with our muscles, with our support, and then things start to lock in place, and we just get a little stuck, right? A little sticky with our feet. Like na ne ni no nu, na ne ni no nu. Well, I'm singing right now, you know. Um, this is this game. So it's ultimately going to be a really fun exercise to sort of play around with. It sounds a little strange when you start taking it faster and faster. But again, we're just working on agility as sort of a core skill that we can practice, you know. So sometimes I'm like, I'm working on strength with my voice. If I do a lot of strength exercises, I probably want to balance it with some agility because it's helped me stay light. So that's that game. Oh, and I was gonna mention, so we did that, crisscrossy thing, right? Na, ne, ni, no, nu. You can do the same thing, right? Here's an exercise that's pretty popular. We try to stay musical, so the patterns change a little bit sometimes. But you can go na, ne, ni, no, nu. So the only difference is I'm skipping that third on the way down. Na, ne, ni, no, nu. Na, ne, ni, no, nu. Na ne ni no nu. So there's just ways to play around with all these different patterns. And you'll start to find that music that you're doing is just variations of these patterns. So you're getting them into your muscle memory. Um, the next thing that I want to talk about is jumping and using registration to work with speed. It's just a special power that our voice has, right, to change gears. So actually, we can use this. If you've done any sort of register work, you'll know this exercise, but we're going to try it particularly to find some agility. So that's doing this, going using an octave and going na in chest voice, and then no in head voice, and you can find that you can cover a lot of territory really quickly. This is kind of considered jumping, right? So we're going like na nu na, and you could start to go higher and higher. You could change the interval. Stick with an octave for now. Na nu na. So you can see because I changed the shape and the overtone, ooh, ah, I can actually jump really quickly, right? So this is working also with that flexibility, like ah, and then we're just going, just trying to see if we can do it just in like a moment, in like a microsecond. So na nu na. You might find this is sort of the magic trick, right? It takes a sec for your voice to set up, or you get stuck, right? Like na nu na ni, and it doesn't, scoops up to it. So this is the practice. It's just na nu na. Hi, welcome. So we'll talk about this when we start doing some more like kind of advanced exercises towards the end. But ultimately, this concept can really help you with cracking as well, right? Finding that abrupt registration. And if you angle your crack appropriately and use it to actually hit a target, you can actually get really fast with your support. What I mean is like, let's see, I'm gonna do like nah, nah. Right, if I crack up to it, sometimes we can hit just a note really quickly. I'm like aiming my crack to a particular note. So from D to G here. Nah, nah, nah. And I can actually just jump around. So there's a variation, right, from what I was doing, going like na, nu, na, nah. jumping abruptly into head voice and back. And you'll find that some songs do this as just the way that their melody works. And if you're not doing the abrupt registration change, you may not get there fast enough, right? Like, na, 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 right? And so that's a weird game that you can practice, just for a little bit, right? You practice that one too much, and your neighbor is going to be like, "What is going on?" But it's actually really, really helpful. And it gets you more comfortable with cracking in general, right? Cracking is something that you can own and use as a stylistic trick, and that takes away a little bit of the fear of it. What if it happens? Obviously in like classical music, it's uh, a little more like uh, we're trying to avoid it a little more, but even then, like it happens, right, all the time. In fact, sometimes people still use it for emotional expression, and they're like, "Oh no," right, doing a kind of a thing like that, right? There's the classical voice. um, yeah. Yeah. So, anyways, that's just another one to think about, right? Agility can be about how quickly you're running notes together. It can be also about how quickly you jump around. Um, let's talk about adding these two things together. So, scale degrees, notes that run together, and then some jumping. So, let's do it. So, I call these kinds of like sweeping patterns. Let's start with just one that is individual notes that are all run together, so not jumping. People have heard this one before, but I'm going to go over it because it's really great for strengthening, for stretching your voice, but also for agility. And if you think of it from the mentality of agility, it'll actually help you get that sort of lighter mixy sensation anyways. So might as well put it into this. So thank you guys, by the way. I try. So here's this idea: is this one is a wide sweeping one. If you're not used to it, break it up into pieces. Um, and again, if it's way out of your range, take it lower, and or just work on your support stuff until you can get more comfortable with something like this. It's a little more advanced. So I've got ha ha ha, pretty normal, and then ha 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 ha. So it's going all the way up an octave, 9, 10 to an 11th, right? So that's a big territory. I broke it into pieces, but together it's ha ha ha. And we're trying to get those all to run together. It takes a sec. So I might move it around and be like ha 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 ha. And I'm thinking about those individual groups. Ha 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 ha. So the idea is where I'm kind of bouncing off of these points is where I can get a little more momentum and work to the next one. So that one's pretty challenging. It can be really, really great though if you're just trying to get something more advanced to kind of work your way through. Here's one that involves some staccato and that descent. So that's going ha 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 ha. So that's the arpeggiation part. Ha 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 ha. Right. So I'm going up to the ninth. Da 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 da. So ha 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 ha. And you try to get all of those strung together. If that's really hard, again, break it up into pieces and be like ha 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 ha. Whoa, and I can go bup, 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 and hit them all. Again, as you're doing this practice, the tendency is to want to try and amp up the energy and kind of bear down into it. And actually, the best way is to lighten up a little bit and find those moments where you can kind of bounce. So, grouping notes together is really, really helpful as a practice to slow down, but it also helps you when you're stringing things together. And this is especially for classical music. It's one of the most helpful things is when you see how the pattern, like little patterns connect and alternate sometimes. You're like da 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 da, kind of a thing like that. And if you can find those little moments, you're creating these little ripples in a larger flow. Otherwise, it just feels static, and you're like, and eventually you get locked up in place. And know that from experience, right? It's a weird, tricky little animal. So this one is helpful for that. This ha 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 ha. I'm doing that long descend. da 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 da. If that's already like, whoa, that's too hard, you can just practice with a regular octave and go like 8 7 6 5 4 3 2 1. That's a really nice exercise. Like la, right? So la. I'm giving myself a moment to recalibrate, right? Pause on a note and then get the next group. And then na, and try to go through them. Na, and try to get that nice and smooth. And then put it into a larger exercise like na, right? So that's just the practice with this. Um, yeah. And I was just going to mention for all of you who are mentioning about private lessons and pricing and things like that. You can record the lessons, so it's can be the gift that keeps giving because we can work with stuff, get it customized for you, and then it's a routine that you can continue to follow. There's also all sorts of other features, right? So think about like on our website, you can ask questions on our forum. You can get feedback if you have, I think the better membership. We have these little feedback things that we're doing, um, and also yeah, just like these things, right? Live streams. This is a group lesson, so please ask questions. Tell me things that you want covered, and we go over it as a group. I'm sure there'll be other features as well. So it's just one process, and learning is we talk about like hours and things like that, and it can be a little more flexible because it just depends on uh, how long it takes sometimes to get something down. So I don't think of it as super like okay, now the time is over. Sometimes things get really packed up, but yes, it's not always as easy to learn in a group class, and sometimes we need like at least a lesson or two to get things going, and to start to get in the right track and make sure that you're doing things right, and then it makes everything else a lot easier. So sometimes I can help identify what you need to work on first to help unlock other things. um, let's keep going. So those are some really challenging exercises, right? I'm dealing with something longer or larger than an octave. I'm talking about jumping around. You can come up with your own. Um, so that's sort of the idea here is once you get more comfortable with this is just the major scale I've been working with. Um, and yeah, so it's this is what we do. I just sort of practice different things. I find stuff from like famous material and try to turn it into an exercise. So like there's lots of famous runs in classical music, like a lot of these like Handel things. Like sometimes I work with people and they want to work on Handel's Messiah, right? Like a famous song that everyone knows. And there's some solos in there where there's just these big long runs. It's from an earlier time period. Um, the other thing is, so we're talking about steps and jumps. So when we talk about a pentatonic scale, right? So this is thinking a little more contemporary for a second. When we're talking about a pentatonic scale, it's essentially the major scale, but with a couple jumps in it. And so you just have to be mindful of those jumps. But there's tons of exercises that you can do here, and these are in our riffs and runs category, right? A lot of the time, although everything I just did can be considered riffs and runs as well. So it's just sort of a little bit of a looser term, like na, that's a run because I'm just running them all together. But the pentatonic scale is what we really think of when we think of like riffing a lot of the time. So what that is, right, is we're taking out 1 2 3, we're taking out the 4 and 5 6, and we're taking out the 7 8. So 1 2 3 5 6 8. So you can just run through that and be like, na, na. But it's careful, right? Because it's really hard to make sure you keep track of that gap, the gaps in different places, right? Na, 8 6 5 3 2 1. Na. Right. So that's another one that you can do. You can do it up and down. Na, na. Right. And so you can practice that with the metronome and go up and down rather quickly. And you can do the same exercises that I did with the regular major scale, where you sort of go down 3 notes, back up, one, down 3 notes, back up one. So we call this sort of like a sequence. So in like na, right? So that's a classic one that people do. Na, I'm doing that sort of spring loady kind of a thing. Na, you can go up like that, and just get really comfortable and familiar with it. Again, if that's feeling really difficult and you're finding you're missing the notes, go to the staccato thing. Be like ha 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 ha, and break it into pieces, and then try to string it all together again. So these are all ways that we improve our agility. We play around with it. Um, and then let's think about what else can we do. Um, so that's the pentatonic thing. We've done the major thing. Oh, here's another one. Just kind of unloading a lot of exercises. And again, it's just stay light and fast and practice these things. Um, like you can try a little bit of one for a sec, move to the other one, and then bounce back and forth. So it's just ultimately the more of these we do, the better conditioned and coordinated our voice is going to get. This is one that's maybe a little more classical. It's a lot of jumping and then involves actually turnarounds at each jump. So this might be especially helpful for some people just because it feels so different and gets your body sort of working in a different way. So we've got, it goes like this: 1, 2, 1, 3, 4, 3, 5, 6, 5, 3, 4, 3, 1. So za. So we're first jumping like ha 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 ha, but then ha. I like sometimes to put like a Z or another consonant on it to just help sort of spring load it. And then eventually you can go like za and try to really just go up and down, right? We're getting our support to contract and relax, contract and relax. So it's a great thing to practice is za, za. Takes a lot of focus. Za, za. And again, I'm really trying to isolate into my belly. It's really tempting to want to like za. Anytime we move, we're going to slow ourselves down. So za. I'm trying to get that little spike, right? That feeling of the spike of my belly. It feels almost like a giggle. This one, sort of that laugh feeling of za. And then you can make any of these more and more challenging, right? So I'm just doing 1, 3, and 5, like, almost basically like a sixth right here. But I could keep going up and go like up to the next octave and the next third and even the next fifth if you're feeling really good about it. So you could, I'll show you. You could do this and go za, and really go all the way up and down. It just feels like you're doing all this weird little gymnastics thing, up and down and around. Sometimes it's a great way to practice your high notes, right? That na, na, and keeping it nice and light, right? Because when we hold on our high notes, think about them as like really heavy weights, right? You're more likely to get static and start to lock and squeeze. So na, na. You can just keep going over and over. It sounds like a little insane, right? But there you go, right? It's pretty funny and it's pretty impressive actually once you can get that. The power is in lightness. It really is. It's a coordination game, right? So sometimes music and singing, we simulate as like actors that we're going full throttle and that we're really into the music and do things with our faces and something. And it can be kind of confusing, right? Because it's actually the secret art form of coordination internally like this, creating space and that stretch and flexibility and making sure that we have proper pressure support from the bottom side as well. That just gives you freedom here. Yes, yes, she is actually. So we alternate now, and it's just a little bit based on our schedules. So I think the next 2 or so weeks is actually going to be Camille, and then I'll be back with some more topics. So we're just doing a little bit of a tag team and covering similar topics, but with our slightly different approaches because we're just slightly different teachers. But we follow, all the same principles and kind of nowadays it's been fun to collaborate and to sort of talk back and forth about different exercises and what we do and plan our content that way. So I think it's nice that, right? It's just like going to different yoga teachers or something, right? And having a slightly different way of feeling out the flow with specific topics in mind, like this agility, right? So agility helps with our riffs and runs, but it also just helps us in general with our flexibility of our voice and even working on your high notes, right? So that one in particular was really helpful for me finding like that was a high A up on the top. Uh, you know, you don't want to go much past that. But if I moved the exercise around, right, I could try some of these harder things and just get comfortable tapping those notes for a sec. And that helped me get ready to like bear down on the note a little bit with the same feeling of lightness, right? So sometimes it's just scary to go up to the high notes of our register. So agility can be really great with that. Um, yeah, thank you. Yeah, we have a very similar practice, right? And so it's we I think it's important to use voice science to understand that as a grounding thing, but also to work with the perception and the feeling of your voice, and then to find flows, right? So this is an exercise flow, and it's just a great way to apply things, apply agility to a song. So what's hard sometimes is like we're working on a song, for example. There's a little bit the strategy, right? Like when we're working on a song, um, if we just do it over and over again, that's one strategy. But sometimes we can be kind of limited with that. It's definitely really, really helpful. A lot of my students will work on vocal technique things, but that's just one branch, right? It's also working on our songs and refining them and doing reps with those. Uh, but ultimately, like you want to have a practice like this because if you're every once in a while playing with your agility, it's just going to increase your overall abilities. So the next time you come to a song, you're going to learn it faster and you're not going to maybe have as much of a certain kind of muscle memory. So it's just, with the voice, it's funny. Like, you look at choirs and it's always a thing with conductors. They're always trying to get the voices to speed up because again, it just takes a sec to get our coordination right. And if we have tension or anything like that, it's going to slow down our voice. The whole mechanism just takes a little bit longer to do these kinds of things. So we've talked about a number of things already, right? So we've done flexibility, doing sirens, right? Because we're covering a wide part of our range. Um, uh, yeah, and there's also I was gonna say on we have some YouTube content and shorter bits too. So if you don't like the full kind of hour-long session or things like that, there's some like 10-minute videos or quick 5-minute routines and things like that. And you can borrow from all of these. So just trying, as a teacher, we're just trying to give you lots of different things to latch onto so we can keep it really accessible for everybody. And then work with it and go from there and eventually add in some more advanced things, but I also don't want to scare people away. um, and yes, it's fun to do impressions of things, and I think a lot of people want to do like impressions of what it's like when things are really bad. I think just this was on my mind. Yes, it's important to show when things don't work appropriately, but I want to be careful about not creating a culture of shame or feeling like ashamed for making mistakes. And so I think that's just this really careful line of like pointing out things that don't serve us well, that are uncomfortable, usually helping students come to that on their own as well, because we know. And so sometimes it's like, the magic of like, wow, I can imitate like a terrible singer and then doing it really well and et cetera, back and forth. And even showing off and all of these kinds of things aren't necessarily as helpful, even though they might be entertaining. So it's just this it's this game that I've been playing with. So hopefully you can use this video as just a way to start turning on the gas and getting some speed with your voice. And again, it's always like a little backwards from what people think, right? Like you think, oh, we need to put more energy into making my voice faster and faster and really turn it up. But it's actually finding some lightness and that ease of phonation that helps us a lot. So sometimes it's actually our ability to come off of our support and let things decompress and sort of ride that wave that helps us find ultimately the fastest way of singing. And it can be kind of disconcerting how effortless it can be after you do this enough times and the body starts to just remember what it feels like. We're covering the major scale. Um, I think when I did minor scale exercises, I did another one that was kind of heavy on the turnarounds. It's also really fun. This was doing it's like way da. So it's that ability to turn around, and it makes for a lot of the sound of moving quickly, just by changing directions, right? Yes, yeah. I also do write songs, and occasionally have been commissioned to write things for people's weddings and for this website, and I also just do it for my own singer songwriter self. So maybe in the future I'll put some of those out, but um, this is I think it's really important to spread this information out and make it more accessible. And so that's what part of this mission is, to try and create a community, right, where we are in support of each other, and just help create more ease in singing. And sometimes it's just getting certain kinds of uh, experiences across and explaining what it feels like once you've been through this journey. Because again, I think finding your voice is a little bit of a journey, and everyone has slightly different ways that they get that sort of mastery. And then from there, it's a lifestyle. Like, we're always reconnecting with our voices. It keeps changing because our body keeps changing. So it's about being present. It's a mind body connection thing. Um, I didn't mention, right, like last time, with a lot of these agility things, it's great to do scale degree numbers, right? I just, don't want to be too repetitive, but you can do these things where you're going like one, one, two, one, one, two, three, two, one, one, two, three, four, three, two, one, right? That sort of exercise, the bungee scale thing, can be very, very helpful. Um, Back to my minor scale thing. I sort of got off a little bit here. So I really like this one. It's a lot of turnaround stuff, going using a sequence, going up and then turnarounds and going back, right? So we're trying to add to not just going only down with our riffs. I think that's a little easier to start with. But here's a fun one if you want something extra too. So it's way and then it goes up, way way you can kind of go endlessly, way 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 and you kind of play around with it that way. So if you're getting tired of the major scale, check out some minor patterns, do minor pentatonic, and you realize you've got more than enough to work on. So that's sort of the idea here. We've got turnarounds, we've got grouping notes together, using staccato, using registration changes, sometimes cracking up to a pitch. That can be a really nice way to do something rather quickly. Thinking about jumping around, right? So in like ha 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 ha, right? Feeling just kind of tapping on a note, staying light, right, is really, really going to help with this stuff. Um, and then doing some of these larger sweeping patterns, right? Starting to link them all together, and ultimately coming up with your own is really, really fun, right? That's sort of when you think like in a song, oh, I want to add in a vocalise. You can listen to some famous artists and think about like, what are they doing with that riff? And you can imitate that, or you can add variation to it. And I think that's sometimes some of the more satisfying things with contemporary music is kind of adding your own personal touch with how you riff and slide around. Um, and I think in general with contemporary music, agility is a really, really strong and powerful and important component. Uh, and I think is actually more important than singing heavy, especially nowadays. And pop music is constantly changing, but um, we're trending towards kind of a lighter mix right now, and that's sort of the sound that people like. And it lends for a lot of flexibility, actually, and your ability to move through notes really rapidly. So it's a physical process, right? This isn't going to be like just do this once, right? It's like if you want to really up your speed, you're going to want to practice this from week to week and take note of what's working and what isn't working. Work with a metronome, right? You can slowly amp it up and use that to sort of guide yourself and see if you can get faster. And if you're running out of things to do, you can meet up with someone like me, and we can give you some new challenges. And in particular, songs and music, I think, can be fun as well, right? So we talk about like, 5 note riffs and 8 note riffs, and at a certain point, it doesn't really matter. It's just your ability to move through those things effortlessly, and and so the more you uh, sort of do things that are less efficient and you use extra muscles, just the more it's going to slow things down. That's sort of the overarching concept here. Um, and yes, of course, we want to be careful about our accuracy as well. If you just hitting random notes, it doesn't really have the same effect. So, I'm always curious, what people like and what they're doing. Does anyone here also have other agility style exercises that they like to do? Um, there's sometimes it's even just repetition. So like running through notes. Feel free to mention in the comments as I go through just a few more little things. You could do like something where you're going like za, right? I'm like da 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 da. So repetition can actually really help as well. It's just endurance, right? Like za, right? You can go usually like more irregular patterns kind of help with this sort of turnaround phenomenon if you're trying to create an exercise for yourself. So like just going up and down an octave, going like za. It feels like it kind of wants to land at the top, right? So it's hard to be like za, right? You can kind of feel a little cumbersome. So sometimes going a little past and back can help you feel this. It's also how we often make a lot of riffs is sort of a note that's off of the chord sometimes and then moves through it and resolves. So going like za all the way up to the ninth. Za, and you can start to kind of do that. You can see with that when we're doing stepwise, it's really hard not to run it together and be like za, right? It'll slow it down, but za, that little pulse actually really matters, I think, in how we perceive things as moving quickly. So the separateness as well. So I'm just going through these concepts, going back and forth as like a checklist. Okay, is my voice light? Am I finding the separateness? Am I accurate with my pitches? And as you keep working these kinds of things, uh, you're just going to get faster and faster with your voice, right? So that's that practice. Before you know it, you'll be an opera star. That's a lot of the times, right? Some of these older music, they're the show off thing is doing an elaborate long run. Um, and yeah, this is the cool thing. And this is why I like to talk about this is like, their music is the same patterns over and over again. But part of our art form as the teacher is to just come up with different routines and ways to move through all of those notes. And you become a little bit of a composer when you start doing that. Um, and it's a great segue into being a songwriter. And so if you find like there isn't something that you like to sing yet that doesn't quite fit with your emotional vibe, sometimes you got to keep searching around. But you can also just make your own. It's a great opportunity to create something that works for your voice. So a lot of the times, right, we get stuck in this process of like imitating what someone else has done, and that might be easy for their voice for particular reasons and repetition. And then we're just trying to imitate that. But sometimes, you have to pause and think like, well, what do I do the best, and what do I like to do? And then you'll find when you write songs for your own voice, you pull off better and better feats because our intuition of writing something for ourselves and getting that path of least resistance. So it's the magic of writing your own stuff sometimes too. And then of course you can write stuff to challenge yourself, right? Just like where I'm making exercises to challenge myself and my students. So there's more than enough there, and it's more about the concept and what it feels like when you're staying light and agile, and then applying it to a song. Because I think once you kind of connect that circle, then you really start to appreciate doing the routines and the practice. And this is the whole point. This is the plug for why do we do all of these exercises? Because some people are like, I just do songs. That's fine. Doing songs is a great way to practice. If you only do songs, you're going to be limited. And if you only do vocal exercises, you're also going to be limited. It's about this interplay. And ultimately, just doing songs, you're not going to get the kind of conditioning that you can get when you're sort of taking it a little bit out of context and working it as a regular routine. It just makes you more capable of picking things up. And ultimately, having agility in your voice creates a lot of endurance, right? So if you're a regular performer, you're going to want to do this kind of stuff because it's just going to help you in general with being able to perform more often. So a lot of the times that's where the exercises come in is people realize, yeah, I'm doing really well. I like this, but I have a lot of demand, and I don't know if I can keep up with the demand, right? We all hit that at a certain point, and we have to protect our voices and create a strategy to have some endurance. So, um, yeah, we that's pretty much all I have for today. We're just about at an hour. Does anyone have any questions or other comments, or just we it can be unrelated, or things that you want to cover. That's all fair game. Let me know now, so I've got some time to start working on some other lesson plans, and everything applies to everything. So, we focus on specific things, but the whole point is that it's sort of cross training with different aspects of the voice. Um, may, I don't quite understand what you mean, but Uh, are you talking about, like, swinging the beat? That's, like, a really I did a little bit of jazz, so it'd be nice to do, like, a part 2 on that, and swinging the beat is a challenging thing to feel out, especially if you don't, play an instrument with it's I feel like a lot of time the swing is something that comes from the interplay too, back and forth between musicians, so, um yeah, yeah, no, totally, and think of it this way too for, so someone's mentioning, yeah, starting to write music and everything. Think of it like material too. I find that this is a really great way to be a songwriter, and it's something that like I've focused a lot on teaching, and I'm like I want to carve out some time so I can write some music. Think of it as like material, right? We get these moments of inspiration, and you create some material and try to find a way to document it and save it. And you let that material sort of float around, and you can start to develop it. Is sort of how I like to see it. So there might be things that like I came up with like years ago that never really finished, and then like all of a sudden I'm like, actually, I want to use that. And it sort of develop it into something totally new. Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, you're talking about singing. Uh, yeah, yeah. No, it's not strange at all. Singing is like the way I talk about it. Just getting a little heady at the end of these live streams. Um, it's a pursuit towards freedom of expression and beauty, and so it can be a really powerful thing, and it can be really um, enriching. And I think it's something that everyone it's a joy of life, right? Everyone can experience it, like singing together, singing with your family, singing with a community. Can be some of the most meaningful experiences, and it really catches up on you sometimes too if you're not used to it. But it's all about um, you know connecting with people, and finding universal truths. And it's interesting how emotions can flow through things and surprise us. So it's a really worthwhile pursuit. Even though it might seem like, okay, why am I doing all these ridiculous exercises and moving rather quickly in this sort of insane way? You do them all back to back like this, and it can seem like that, but in a certain moment, a riff or a run or moving rather rapidly can be really glorious as a buildup of energy and an expression. Sometimes it's like when the words can't say enough, you do a big run, and it just really can floor people and be really surprising. And I guess I would lead with this sort of as an end point. Like sometimes we can get kind of riff happy. It's super fun. Like I'll honestly like as a way to practice this. Sometimes I will just practice doing some riffs and runs to like songs that I'm hearing, like at the grocery store or anywhere, and just practice doing this kind of lightly. It's a great way too, because you're like, you're sort of doing it to yourself, and unless you're feeling open to just sort of sing out in the grocery store, but it'll keep you in a sort of a lighter, more reserved place. You can kind of fiddle out these sort of these shapes without actually looking at them on a piano, and see if you can lock into it, and that can be a really fun experience. Um, yeah, yeah. So there you go. That's what this whole point is like. This is for specific moments that can be really, really powerful. Just one part of the practice. So if you're feeling like I can't get my voice to move like that, just take some time. And agility is one component. So sometimes when we're working a lot on strength, our agility might be lost a little bit. Do a lot of agility, and you might not have the same kind of stability if you're doing a lot of strength exercises. So becomes a playoff. Find what your fortes are, but often sort of working the opposite can only do you good. So, thanks again, everybody. I love that everyone's participating and asking questions, and even questions about like why are we doing this and why is it important. And um, those are really, really valid questions that you want to ask yourself. Singing is much more than just the physical process, right? It's a mind body connection, and it's about our expression, and it can be a really freeing experience. That's why I'm kind of obsessed with it, and I love the experience of seeing someone unlocking their voice and helping them along that process. So, um, yeah. So there you go, everybody. Um, well, start writing some songs, and you'll be on your way to being a songwriter. So I'll leave with that concept, and I hope you guys enjoy Camille's next few lessons, and I will be back with more in the future. So take care, everybody, and have a good rest of your day.